Okay, cool.
Right. Well, we'll discover that the Enterprise has a spore drive, too.
Oh, God, shut up.
You gotta push the other button. Woke up, I think, around 4 a.m.?
I thought you said you woke up at 9.
Yeah, that too.
We're here today to talk about Star Trek, the original series, Episode 1, the very first episode of Star Trek ever written or produced.
Well, I mean, some people would call the Man Trap Episode 1. Is this Episode 0?
It's the pilot.
Yes, but, I mean, if you're going off of what was
Production code it's 099, if you want to go down that road.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
Why were we starting at 99?
Production code 099. I don't know. Ask the producers if you want to get all fancy on me.
So would Episode 1, is that 100?
No, that's 101.
Oh.
I actually don't know if that's 101 in Star Trek production code.
Look who's talking about things he doesn't even know what he's talking about.
In typical television lingo, it's episode 101.
I think the point is we're here to talk about
The
Christopher
Cage.
Pike.
Christopher Pike. That's the reason we're here, to talk about the pilot of Star Trek. It was not released until, I think, the 80s, other than in the form of the two-part menagerie
What are you
episode.
talking about? It's the first episode on Netflix.
Yep, not released until the 80s.
But the first time I watched it, it had it on there.
Yeah. So why did we pick The Cage? Why did we pick the pilot? It's because a new Star Trek series got announced, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is being produced right now. It has
Star Trek Enterprise.
It has, yeah, there was a brief rumor on the internet that it was called Star Trek Enterprise, like the previous show Star Trek Enterprise. And it was on this website called, I think, Bounding Into Comics. Complete rumor, completely baseless, but given who Star Trek is currently being run by, I did not entirely doubt that could very well be the name of this new series. I mean, heck,
loved it.
The 2009 movie was just called Star Trek, just like the original series was just called Star Trek.
Bam.
Yep.
Motion picture.
Yeah. So they announced this new series probably, I want to say, a week ago from the time of us filming this. And again, it stars Anson Mount as Christopher Pike. He's made an appearance in Star Trek Discovery. Ethan Peck as Spock number 3, the second recasting of Spock. And then Rebecca Romijn as number 1. Yes, exactly. So this got us to kind of thinking about the pilot episode of Star Trek and our first real and only real look at Pike from the original.
Where it began. Well, and then there's the menagerie.
Yeah, but our only real look at like, well, I mean, that's a clip show of The Cage. It got us thinking about Christopher Pike, the character of Pike. You know, this is the only story from the original series that we really see him in, is this interaction with the Telosians, right? And so we decided to review it and then maybe come back to it a little later when this hypothetical new Star Trek series comes out, which, given the current circumstance, I don't know when it'll even enter production.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, but they announced it and the actors have all announced it, and so it must be greenlit to go into production. So that's we're going to review the episode of the original series first, and then we're going to kind of talk about our thoughts on the new series a little later after that. So if you want to jump to us bitching about new Trek, then jump to this time frame. Otherwise, we will talk about this pilot episode. So this episode was rejected by NBC for being too cerebral, which is really funny.
Ironic, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what Star Trek was. And so it's pretty interesting. But I mean, you see a lot of this sort of cerebral elements of Star Trek come into play for the first time in this episode, which is really cool. But interestingly enough, Lucille Ball from I Love Lucy ran Desilu Studios, which was the studio that greenlit the first pilot, right? And she had a lot of faith in Gene Roddenberry and his project. And so when NBC turned down that initial pilot, she was able to get them to request a second pilot. Wow. And that is the episode Where No Man Has Gone Before, starring William Shatner. and the rest is history. The actor who played Pike, he died in 1969. So ultimately, for the franchise, it's sort of a good thing they went the route of Kirk. But I mean, one I guess could argue that if he had stayed on Star Trek, he probably wouldn't have been in that production that happened in.
Would have actually, it cost him his life. The actor was actually abducted by aliens and experimented on, and when he returned, he was, his gravitational field was altered, and he collapsed into a black hole, actually.
You sound like the new Trek writers trying to write Star Trek babble.
No, Ben.
His gravitational field. You didn't say yum yum?
I didn't say yum yum, and I didn't say anything about red matter, so.
The Red Angel.
The Blue Angel. That's what I died. That's what I'm gonna die from.
Star Trek talk, new Trek talk at this time frame. So, if you have not gotten a chance to view this since it aired in 1965,
get with it already.
Sorry, it aired in the mid 80s. If you've not had a chance to watch it, spoilers. So watch out. So we start out. The Enterprise receives a distress signal from a colony. Or not from a colony. They're en route to a colony, I believe, to deliver medical supplies. And they receive a distress signal, and their view screen starts getting interfered with.
They pick up an old-style radio signal.
That's a distress signal.
Is that what that weird interference is, actually, at the start?
I want to say that that's like maybe the Telosians.
That must have been.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that. They're getting that weird effect
weird
on
wave.
their view screen.
Yeah.
I'd love that if that's just like a radio wave.
It's a radio wave, sir.
It's a radio wave interfering with the view screen of the Enterprise.
Is it one of these meteors flying by? No.
But we get our first view of Spock. He's actually the very first line in all of Star Trek is Spock saying something about, have you checked the circuit?
Check the circuit.
And right away, you can obviously tell the characterization of Spock changes a lot from the pilot to the rest of Star Trek ever, maybe minus Star Trek Discovery.
It's a little proto Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's emotional. I think doesn't he kind of have
developed into
bit
he's a
of
little
crazy,
shaggier too.
Yeah.
But this is also our introduction to Pike, who honestly seems like a bit of a proto Picard. He's got his first officer's number 1. He says engage. Engage. And he's also a bit older and a little more stoic.
Yeah.
Than Kirk.
Mm-hmm. And he has that scene with the doctor, right? That we'll talk about, where he kind of you get hints that he's more advanced in his career than Kirk ever was, and that he's maybe considering whether or not he wants to be where he is, right? Kind of like Sisko a little bit too at the start of Deep Space Nine. Yeah. So they encounter the 18-year-old shipwreck, right?
Yep.
In case you're wondering, our neighbors upstairs like to drum.
Started drumming.
Just started drumming.
Right above us.
Right above us.
So it's the ship crashed there 18 years ago. They were originally like a scientific
exploration. Yeah.
They were out actually pre-warp travel, right?
Yeah, I think they were traveling by sublight. Isn't there a line from the episode
like that,
where they're traveling by sublight?
We also have like printed fax sheets, or
that's the best thing about the episode, honestly. And then he takes it to. That's like my dad. My dad likes to print emails and then hand them to me, and say like, "Hey, read this email."
Here, I CC'd you on this.
Yeah, I literally carbon copied this email for you. Yeah, that's what it felt like. Read this handout, Captain Pike.
Yep. My God.
Which we were talking about this earlier. I know we meant to talk about New Trek later, but if they show a fax in Star Trek Strange New Worlds on the Enterprise bridge, I will excuse everything else that they might do and will do in that show. Anyways. And then you have the scene with Pike and the Doctor, where we get a little bit of backstory on Pike. He wants to quit. He's tired of manning a crew of 240, however many people are on the Enterprise.
The responsibilities. Doctor, the good doctor brings in the cure-all of any man's ailments in the 1960s. So
Booze.
some hard liquor. Yeah.
Yep. You've got that line about the bartender, doctor. You know,
Yeah, actually really good dialogue in that scene.
It was written by Gene Roddenberry. I liked that scene. But then we get a follow-up distress signal, right, from Talos 4. And so they're confirmed that there are survivors on the planet from what they know.
Although I just am thinking about this now, though, of like if they're just transmitting radio waves, and when they first pick up the signal, whoever receives it's like, oh, that's how long it would have taken a radio wave to get here. It'd be 18 years, and then it's like, is this follow-up signal?
Right.
Like I didn't.
Are the survivors? Does this mean there were survivors 18 years ago?
Is this a very recent signal? How did this get here very quickly? Anyways.
Right. But could have been the Telosians sending a more advanced signal, but they should have probably figured that out.
Like, how did we get a new signal so suddenly?
So then they go to the Talos 4, right? They change course. Then we get the away mission. They encounter this old crew of scientists with a suspiciously young and seemingly well-kept female along with them.
Vema, Veronica.
This is Vina.
It's like we didn't do our homework before.
Well, no, I thought you should have written this down. We were checking.
You know, why don't we show your notes that have doodles all over them, okay? Oh, I'm gonna get notes like Ben, and then I'm gonna doodle all over them the whole time.
I'm a doodler, you know.
So then Pike goes with Vema, the lady. I don't know.
Vina. Her name was Vina.
Vina. Okay. Oh, now you know it.
I knew it the whole time.
Okay, sure. You just kept it in your head. You just doodled on your page.
Helps me think
Vina.
Vina.
So Vina goes to show Pike something. It's kind of a trick, right?
It's time to show the captain our secret. The perfect specimen.
Yeah, and then the Telosians capture him, take him underground. They don't give a fuck.
Picard's not Picard.
Freudian slip.
Yeah, well, Freudian sleep. Proto-Picard. Proto-Picard should have really been alarmed, I feel like, when Vina is like, he's a perfect specimen.
Prime specimen. I didn't get that last message, Captain.
Yeah.
And the doctors actually, or the hologram, or what, the illusions of the old scientist cover like really well for her. You know, excuse her, she was raised by scientists. But then just like she continues with it and she's just like, it's time to show him he's a perfect specimen. It's just like, hold up, what are you talking about?
Let's pump the brakes here, lady. Yeah.
Slow down.
Yeah, no, it's there's definitely that happens a lot in Star Trek where you've got a line of very obviously suspicious dialogue, and then they're like, well, let's keep investigating here. Maybe don't do that when she says, let's show him our secret.
He's a perfect specimen.
Yeah. So then he gets captured, and then he's in that little cage, the title of the episode, with I call it the Wubble shield. He's got the shield that he's banging against. And then they talk about him while he's there in the third person. Very impolite. These Telosians do not have manners.
But really showcasing that like he's like an animal in a cage. They're significantly elevated above him, so he's just a display that they're essentially,
Yeah.
It appears, Magistrate, that the intelligence of the specimen is shockingly limited.
This is no surprise since his vessel was baited here so easily with a simulated message.
Right. He's it shows like kind of what they're capable of with him, right?
Capable of great rudeness.
Yes. And then he has the dream scene. He encounters a barbarian dude. He fights, but he knows that this is all kind of a show. He feels like you're saying kind of like an animal. He resists the urge to fight, but then he seems to notice that Vina is reacting very realistically with fear to this attack. And so then he ends up fighting off this barbarian guy. And then...
Kills him.
Yeah, he kills him. And then he won't play along after that with any more of their tricks because he goes back into the cage, right? And then they torture him in this sequence where he's supposed to be in hell, where he's in this sort of what looks to be like molten hot liquid with fire all around him. And I remember when I'd seen this as a kid, that scene terrified me because that's pretty well done for 1960s.
It's actually pretty horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just,
Looks like he's in great pain.
Yeah.
And he's got all that oatmeal all over him.
All over his arms.
Yeah.
Toasty, hot oatmeal.
But
That's my personal hell, just swimming in oatmeal for the rest of my life.
hey, but if it's got those little dinosaur eggs that melt down and then it's just little dinosaurs in it, it's delightful.
Do you think that existed in 1964?
100%. Where did they come from? Where did we even get it? We had to make it when dinosaurs were still around. So where else did that inspiration come from?
There's a limited supply of dinosaur eggs for our oatmeal.
That's right. We're running out.
That's actually, you know what? That's what the
Great
next
cash.
Jurassic Park movie is going to be about. They have to get more dinosaur eggs for the dino bites.
What we didn't count on was
Not
how
that much.
popular our dinosaur egg melting oatmeal would become.
So we had to contact. What's the?
This thing goes way deeper than you ever could have imagined.
What's the company in Jurassic Park? Shit, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's like
The-
Dinos Are Us.
No, not Dinos Are Us, you dingus. It's what
It's,
the fuck's the name of the
It's
company?
Newman's Shaving Cream.
It's the company behind Newman's Shaving Cream. Yeah, not Barbasol though.
That's how he sneaks out the dinosaur eggs. But we see Pike is just consistently, refusing to give in to captivity. That's his big fight we're seeing throughout all these different sequences. They're tempting him with every possible. First, it's action, and then it's leisure, and then it's sexual fulfillment.
With the Orion slave girl. You get this first depiction of a, sort of, would you call that telekinetic powers from the Telosians? What would you call that?
I feel like telekinetic would be like moving an object.
Yeah. What would
then-
you call that? More just,
I don't know, right? It's like
they're able to imprint. The Telosians, you kind of have this first instance of a species that's able to affect other people's minds, right? Through telepathic powers, kind of.
Yeah.
This is something you see a lot in Star Trek, and it's kind of the first example of this.
powerful illusion ability. Yeah, I don't even know what you call that.
Yeah.
Illusionism.
So, yeah,
That's
you're
why I call it Talos.
telekinesionism.
Yes, telekinesis.
Right. They're trying all these experiences on him to try to get him to break somehow. But he won't break, and that's kind of the overall thesis of the episode is how much humans hate captivity because, they will go to death rather than to, take any of these pleasures, any of these...
Like honestly, awesome. Like
Right.
world at your fingertips, kind of.
There's this scene with him at his, hometown with Venna there. Very easily
when
they
they're
could...
out in the
Yeah,
field.
yeah, it could very easily be a family type experience. And then obviously, with the slave girl,
And you've got as many sugar cubes as you want in your pocket, ready to go feed the horses.
as many.
As
Yeah,
many, just-
you're never gonna run out.
Till you get tired of sugar cubes.
But
even
despite
take one
all
first.
of this, humans will not tolerate being in captivity. And so he starts to realize that his thoughts of hate will sort of block the Telosians and block their ability to read his mind. So he just starts thinking very hateful thoughts, kind of the opposite of the Where No One Has Gone Before episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I think that's the one where they go to the edge of the universe and they have to
that's
not
right.
think about anything. Kind of a
like
similar
the
application.
Ghostbusters,
Yeah.
and where they think of the
Right, yeah.
steam puff marshmallow man, and then he becomes the destroyer, starts raiding the city.
Exactly. Very similar idea. And then he captures the Telosian, and that's where there's a bit of a switch, right? Because they're trying to get the phasers, and you see just how small and frail they are when he captures them in the cage. And I should mention that's after they get number one and the yeoman to beam down to try to give him a selection, right? And the whole time you're watching this, there's obviously these allusions to the Telosians having to go underground, right? Because Venna says that, having to, because of war, having to sort of abandon a lot of their technology. And then we'll get to the end a little later where I think you kind of get the very first instance of this classic Star Trek twist. But and then they agree to release them because he kind of overcomes their mental block. Or not overcomes, he basically kind of figures out how they're able to cast these illusions into their minds. So through the threat of death, they're able to reveal the secret of the illusion behind the Telosians by pointing the phaser to, or the laser, I should say. Sorry, it's the laser in this episode.
I'm willing to bet you've created an illusion this laser is empty.
And they point, so he points the laser pistol at the Telosian's head, reveal the illusion, and they escape. Right.
You're making me think that these don't work, but I'm guessing, well, shall we see what happens if I pull this trigger face pointing at your head, your big old head? And then he's like, he's got me. Mm-hmm. Then fun little reveal that they've like melted the entire top of the elevator shaft.
Yeah, I liked that little detail after the laser cannon gets pointed on it, because number one beams down with another away team to try to rescue Pike. Point the laser cannon.
And they've got goggles.
And so then, they get up out onto the planet's surface with number one, the yeoman, and Vina. And then they...
Venus
flytrap.
Well, then, essentially, they're like, we're dying out.
Your unsuitability has condemned the Telosian race to eventual death. Is this not sufficient?
No other specimen has shown your adaptability. You were our last hope.
You two were kind of our last hope at having, artisans and farmers to kind of restart civilization on the surface of the planet. And at this moment, Pike actually kind of starts to sympathize with them a little bit, and he's like, just spare my crew and number one and my yeoman, and I'll stay here with Vina. And then even they're given some alone time. We're revealed that Vina's all sort of disfigured like, and she's actually much better off with the Telosians, which sets us up for the menagerie later on. But at that point, Pike is okay with leaving her there,
because she's got a secondary Pike.
Oh,
which,
yeah.
I love it. She's got an imaginary Pike, and I just love that if the roles were reversed in that sequence, that would be a much different feeling sequence. If a male suddenly got a replicated number one and was leading her off like, ooh, yeah, I got this imaginary number one. Ugh.
Oh boy, what if they were trying to pull Pike from her brain, but then they grabbed like a fish Pike, and so then she's just walking off hand in hand with a giant fish.
That's what it should have been. Honestly, I think this guy needs to write for the next Star Trek. Anybody needs to. Anyways, we'll get to that. And you mentioned that they're a dying breed, the Telosians. This is their last ditch effort, because they've gone through a bunch of other species, but no one quite had the adaptivity of humanoids. But the tragic turn for the Telosians is that humanoids then hate being captive so much that they...
Catch 21.
Right.
That book was banned in a school once somewhere because of the stuff. I never read it. I don't know why.
Yeah, Catch 21.
Catch 21.
It's a good book. But what you were mentioning was that I think kind of the first instance of the Star Trek villain semi-twist, right?
They're not all bad, or they're multi-dimensional.
Yeah, exactly. They're multi-dimensional characters. They're not just villains. I mean, at the start, they're talking in front of Pike about him being very disrespectful, and then torturing him literally. And you think that they're doing this just as sort of messed up experiments. it's also a bit sort of a subversive commentary on humans and our own experiments with animals, and
Plus, kind of the environmental themes of they've destroyed their planet through warfare, and
and all of their experts died out.
Yeah,
they don't have an ability.
Almost like maybe there was a bit of a anti-intellectual movement even amongst the Telosians. Interesting.
Yeah, for brains being so big and pulsating, you would think they'd be smarter.
Do you think they wouldn't have let that happen?
But it sets up a lot of themes.
It's a greater commentary on the dangers of virtual reality and getting too caught up in your own. Because maybe that I think that's kind of what they hint at, that they were just so caught up in living their own like fantasies that they didn't give a shit about doing anything else.
Right, because there's the line at the end where Pike's like, "Well, let's work something out. Let's help you guys." And then they say to him, "We can't afford to let you guys get a hold of this."
Your race would learn our power of illusion and destroy itself too.
Yeah.
You will discover our power of illusion and destroy yourselves too.
Very good. A very good first episode, and it's a good look at what becomes a lot of the ethos and pathos of Star Trek, right? Sets up a lot of these things that become very commonplace. The multifaceted antagonist, who's maybe... And I mean, this exists in a lot of media, but I think Star Trek always has a really good angle on this, this idea of the villain that's just trying to do what they need to do for themselves, and
not necessarily just pure evil.
Yeah, a lot of these multi-dimensional problems and ethical dilemmas, and so it does a good job at that. And then there's a little scene on the bridge that's kind of a prototype of the Kirk McCoy banter, where Pike and the Doctor, and then the yeoman, they all have their own little scenes on the bridge at the end, and that becomes pretty standard for TOS. And so it's a good episode. It's definitely dated, and it's definitely got the vibe of a lot of pilots where it's a little bit clunky. It's trying things out, right? It's got some inconsistencies with later Star Trek, obviously, but you got to let that go at this point.
But the heart of it is there, and it really kind of shows. It's showing its bones a little bit, but it's it's 100%. It pretty well knows what it is in a lot of ways, even at that point. Yeah,
I think it could have maybe. Obviously, it didn't get picked up. It could have maybe focused on some of the other characters a little bit more. It was very Pike-centric. And I don't know what exactly they had planned the show to be before it got approved for that second pilot. But, maybe a little more number one, a little more of the Doctor, a little more Spock.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, too, is just that I guess that was the popularity of Spock had a large fact to do with bringing Shatner in for the leading man as Kirk, because Spock's character being more reserved and kind of being more the straight man, the runners or whoever made these decisions wanted someone more kind of flamboyant and a little more, a little more expressive.
A little more flamboyant.
Yeah, a little.
The imposter is not to be injured.
Lieutenant Kirk! I'm Captain Kirk! I'm Captain Kirk.
Is a better foil, to have kind of a better chemistry. It's, with Pike and what's that actor that played him?
That played Pike?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Pike being also a very reserved character, there's less, less chemistry.
Less dynamic to go between the two. Yeah, they definitely got that hammered out when Shatner came in. Jeffrey Hunter did a good job playing Pike, but I definitely love William Shatner a little more. It's hard not to be completely impartial. I would have been really interested to see Pike's character in the original series.
Well, now you get to. Coming 2021 to CBS, we've got Star Trek Enterprise.
Written by Alex Kurtzman, Kirsten Beer,
You know what, though?
and Akiva Goldsman. the three.
Well, is it going to be
game? Yeah, no, those are
because
all the
then
people.
who is it? Are they going to write that and Picard and Discovery?
So I don't actually know if Kirsten Beer is going to be in Strange New Worlds. I know that Alex Kurtzman is heading the project because he's just in charge of all of Star Trek right now. And I know that Akiva Goldsman is like going to be the showrunner, I think. So maybe that means that Akiva is not involved in Picard anymore. What I would love is if Akiva is not involved in Picard. Actually, I would love if no one was involved in Picard and Picard just fucking died and didn't get resurrected.
Picard did die.
Yeah.
I actually, though, I'm going to remain hopeful about against maybe all likelihoods. I'm going to remain hopeful that maybe we will get just a good, well written show. Maybe even it might be something different, but maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be a good show.
So remind me a year and a half from now to come back and pull this clip to see your reaction. Because let's talk about this. Let's talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the new show that was announced last week. So you're looking forward to it. I think there are reasons to look forward to it because, and I said the same thing about Picard. There were reasons to look forward to it. So the reasons to look forward to Strange New Worlds is that apparently they've listened to the fans and it's going to be a more episodic show, more optimistic, right? And kind of more centered around a lot of those classic Star Trek values. Anson Mount in Star Trek Discovery, he does make a good Christopher Pike. And I can get into that a little bit later on just my thoughts of recasts and recasting. There's a lot for me to unpack there. But as recasts go, he does a good job of it,
Well, Commander, this is awkward, but back in Mojave, I learned the best way to get into a cold stream was to jump right in.
Ethan Peck, I'm not as sure about that guy, especially because he's Spock number 3. I think at this point I'm getting sick of Spock recasts.
Oh yeah,
Give us.
I honestly don't think we should be reviving any of these characters.
Me too. Yeah.
But I think if we're going to, I don't know. I have not seen any really of Ethan Pike as Spock.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, did I say that name wrong?
You said Ethan Pike.
Yeah, Ethan Pike. Ethan Peck. But if I picture him as not Spock, but like just a different Vulcan, maybe
it would work.
Yeah.
He seems good enough in what I've seen him in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think let's preface this.
Who was the second Spock though?
That was the JJ Spock.
Yeah, JJ
Zachary
Spock.
Quinto.
I honestly would have liked if they had just stuck with him. I thought.
Oh,
he
I don't
was
think I
really
would.
good-
I don't think I would have a problem
Yeah.
with him.
I mean, I know they obviously couldn't for like legal reasons and
all the
business, but
Viacom and like Paramount
Bad
and all
Robot.
that.
Yeah, but I think he did a really good. He just seemed a lot more Leonard Nimoy-y.
He did.
Yeah.
He really did seem like he studied the characteristics that made Spock. But let's preface this by briefly discussing our thoughts on recasts. My thoughts personally, I think recasts should really just be saved for superhero movies and James Bond movies. It really bothers me when characters that are so closely tied to these actors get recast so commonly. Now, obviously, you have the Star Trek reboot in 2009. I will give that movie generally a pass in terms of casting, because I think they did a really good job casting that movie. Everyone except maybe Zoe Saldana.
Didn't like her as Uhura?
Not as much. She's a great actress, but I don't think she made a. She just seemed the least, and maybe Chekhov, right?
Wow.
Even
Don't
though
speak ill of the dead, Ben.
I don't mean to speak ill. I just don't. He didn't remind me that much of Chekhov from
Although,
the original series.
I do
he was a good
feel
character.
Like, yeah. Although, but speaking of original series Chekhov, man, was his Russian accent. Like, I mean, it's like it just plays into the campiness of it now.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, it's such a bad Russian accent.
Walter Koenig's.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
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 The area was first mapped by the famous Russian astronomer Ivan Burkov almost 200.
John Bird.
Takes away from it a little bit, but I mean, it just adds to the charm, of course. But I think they really should have done, though, is any depiction of Kirk at any point ever should just continually be William Shatner. Like if we got 25-year-old Kirk, 80-year-old William Shatner.
De-aged or no?
Like maybe some makeup and like really like Uncanny Valley de-aging, but he's still just rounder and like less mobile. Oh, that's the way to do it.
That's the only way.
I would watch the shit out of that.
That's the only way to show Kirk again. I mean, Chris Pine was okay. He wasn't.
He was good.
He was good. He wasn't William Shatner like you're saying.
They should have hammed it up a little bit.
A little bit.
You know, I mean,
yeah. Rather than just make him a sex fiend like they did. But like, you know, okay, so they did as good a job as they could, I think, recasting. Okay. But then you start to get Spock number 3, and it's like, okay, he's like the same age as Zachary Quinto. There's 2 dudes that have played Spock that are the same age. That should never be a reality. That should be like absolute last case scenario.
Ben, just look at Spider-Man.
I don't have a problem with that. Superhero. Well, okay, you're. Don't get me started on all of the 17,000 Spider-Mans that have existed since the Tobey Maguire trilogy. That is something else also. But like then I've also heard that, and it is just rumor, but I've heard that they're recasting Kirk for this Strange New Worlds TV show.
But why is Kirk going to be in this show?
Because they're going to show him meeting Spock. They're going to show them meeting Spock.
But will that be then the end of Pike's show? I mean...
No, I think they're just going to have like a little passing encounter, and there's going to be that moment where, you know, he's going to be like, the name's Kirk, you know.
My name's Jim.
And they're going to get off on the wrong foot. I'm sure they're going to have like some fight
totally
at the start.
Yeah.
I bet it's going to be, if I had to guess, it's going to be over a woman, right? And Kirk is going to, because this is new Trek we're talking about, and they have to put down old characters like Picard and like Seven of Nine, and they have to really reveal them for what they truly were. And so Kirk is going to be, I think, harassing some woman because he's only ever been a sex fiend to these people. And then Spock is going to tell him off, and they're almost going to come to blows. But at the very last second, something happens.
Kirk will just fully become Zap Brannigan.
Yeah, he'll fully give me some champagne, Kip.
Yeah.
On the double. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Zap Brannigan is 50% Captain Kirk, 50% William Shatner. So, yeah, no, I think absolutely they're going to overplay all of those characteristics. But, I mean, it just gets back to this idea of I'm just so sick of, let's take the character and recast him and make him not a lot really like he kind of was, right? Like Ethan Peck, I mean, he's singing show tunes in that one Star Trek short. Like, I don't know. I'm really over this whole recasting.
Well,
thing.
It really kind of ties into just this
my personal thing.
This larger trend that's been going on for the last 15 years in all of film and television is just regurgitating old stories. I mean, these are obviously going to be different stories, but they're just so concerned about getting as many people in to the seats or onto the screen that they're looking for what they think they can sell, and so they're just
for what's safe, right?
Regurgitating old stories, old characters, rather than just maybe coming up with something new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Anson Mount makes a great Starfleet captain. You know, I think he's maybe one of the better captains that we've seen in new Trek. Obviously, Lorca's evil, right? But like he's kind of one of the only ones who seems to have like that commanding presence, you know, that is completely absent in JL, is completely absent in Lorca, in Discovery, and so that's just my thought on
Captain Giorgio.
She dies right away, and then
and then she's mirror.
Mirror Universe.
I haven't watched Discovery.
You haven't watched it in like...
Well, I watched the first, I think, 5 or 6 episodes.
Yeah, that's right. And that was like a couple years ago.
Yeah, it was
right?
a while ago.
She's the one who... She gets the other character to say the yum yum line, which you see a lot in YouTube videos about new Star Trek. You have all of the parts there to make a really killer show. The fan base loves Anson Mount, so you have their... a lot of people are supporting it for that cause. I personally don't really think, and this is kind of a common theme, so I'm sorry to echo it, but I really don't think the current writers have the ability to deliver the kind of story that they're promising. And Star Trek Discovery, what you've seen, from what we've seen of new Trek, it's left kind of a bad taste in my mouth on the people in charge. And it's kind of like, I don't know, and this is maybe just me, the perspective of time will answer this question, but this may just be me being a bitter fanboy, which is entirely possible.
Nerd rage.
Yep. Gonna get this video removed from the Star Trek subreddit. But like the fact that they've had so many missteps with Star Trek, they announced this, this is gonna be a more optimistic show. This is gonna be episodic. And I'm just like,
but it's this weird...
I don't believe you.
It's this weird failing up because Discovery... I don't know, it got mixed reviews at best, but then it's like, well, here you go, here's Star Trek Picard, which, again, not very well received for the most part. Oh, here's another show for you. It's like, at what point does it ever matter how well the things that you're creating are doing? I don't know.
Oh, no, I entirely...
What do I know?
I entirely agree. I think part of the problem is that, well, we don't know at all what the viewership is of any of these shows.
They're not putting out the
numbers.
Figures,
Yeah. And so you don't know if people actually like these shows to the level that they maybe need them to. And then second, obviously, with the internet, there are so many ways to manipulate, scores. I mean, obviously, Rotten Tomatoes is complete bullshit now.
Oh, you just got to buy the bots.
Yeah.
Get some comments.
Yeah, so it's really hard to gauge what actual people
Why don't we buy bots?
think. Oh, we should.
We gotta look this up.
We gotta look this up. We're gonna buy 1,000 comments for this video.
That's right. We're just
Hashtag love Ben and Dan.
Trending, here we come.
Yep. That's how we fail up, apparently.
Let's just put some money into it. We're not investing our capital correctly.
We are not. And so, I don't know. I guess overall, my feelings on this new show are that I am excited for it for a couple reasons. Anson Mount, and the fact that they are apparently putting in the effort to make it episodic and more optimistic. Okay, those elements excite me, but...
I mean, and it's not... But it's... I worry that they're looking at it like, the fans didn't like it because the story was serialized. Like looking at Picard or Discovery, and it's like, the fans didn't like it because it was serialized. They didn't like it because it was darker. When those were really not the problems at all.
Yeah, exactly. That's I think why this doesn't leave a good feeling in me, is because it's like, okay, so the people that created those garbage piles are still in charge of this. I still don't trust them, and it feels like they're just more pandering to us than anything. Like, they've been bitching about the cynicism in Picard. They've been bitching about the episode or the serialized storytelling. And the reason I think a lot of people bitch about that is because they don't do it well. And if it's a clunker of an idea, it's a whole season that sucks.
Right.
And so old Star Trek, it had clunkers, but it was one episode, right? And then you maybe have the chance for redemption the next episode.
Imagine if you had an entire season of Kirk helping a planet of people realize that they were the descendants of the United States.
Oh, the Yangs.
The Yangs. The Yanks.
Oh my God! Right.
So there's a whole season of that.
If that was the season reveal, like that dumb fucking scene in Star Trek Picard where she's narrating, Basil Exposition, she's narrating Siri. Not Siri, that's in the Plinkett review. Where Sutra is narrating the message from the robot
the AI.
tentacle AI. Yeah, exactly. If it, if you base your whole season on a dog shit idea, like that dog shit episode of the original series, which was good up until the last 5 minutes, then you run the risk of pulling a Game of Thrones, of where you ruin a lot of a big story because of some bad decisions, right?
But if you get it right and you do good, then you'll have the fans asking, was that an A or an A plus?
Exactly. A plus for Game of Thrones. Yeah, but I think that's kind of my overall impression of this is, okay, I should be excited for a couple of these things, but I'm not, based on the people who are running it. And here's another thing. So, okay, episodic, more optimistic, good lead actor, right? Rebecca Romijn, she's good. Ethan Peck he exists.
I think he seems like a good actor. I don't know.
But he exists as a dude who plays Spock.
Right.
But other than that, okay, so they're basically just remaking what the original series was supposed to be. They're putting themselves in the position that they put themselves in with Star Trek Discovery, which they went 1,000 years into the future to resolve, right? But you're setting a show literally on the same ship as the original series with some of the same characters 5 years before James T. Kirk, in, I'm assuming, the same sector of space. Obviously, with Kirk, in the original series, the positioning of the Federation within the galaxy and within galaxies is a bit different.
Commander of the Space Vehicle Enterprise from a stellar group at the other end of this galaxy.
According to these coordinates, we have traveled 7,000 light years and are located near the system J25.
Travel time to the nearest starbase.
At maximum warp in 2 years, 7 months, 3 days, 18 hours.
So obviously that's going to be different. But I don't know, they're putting themselves in this same limitation in writing. We know what happens to Spock. We know what happens to Pike even, right? We know what happens to the Enterprise. And so I don't... Here's a show that does prequel really well. Better Call Saul, right? As a show that exists in a larger universe...
Star Wars.
As a show that exists in a larger universe, the Breaking Bad cinematic universe, they do a really, really, really good fucking job making sure that everything makes sense, making sure that characters you see before, their characterization makes sense for them later on, right? The only thing that really doesn't make sense in Better Call Saul is Mike's granddaughter. Her casting, she's like a 5-year-old in Better Call Saul, and in Breaking Bad, which is supposed to be 6 years later, she's like a 6-year-old. That's the one thing.
Got Benjamin Button syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the pacing of Better Call Saul, I could maybe complain about a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I do, the small promo for, you do see the Enterprise, and there is that little,
the little Spock volcano?
Well, you got the little Spock volcano, but you also on, I think it's on the helmsman's little module, there's a little, lamp visor thing, which you actually only see in the cage. You don't see in the rest of the series, I don't think.
The kind of War of the World looking
Yeah, they look like
Delios.
the little tripod
Yeah.
ships or whatever. So maybe if there's a little bit of attention to detail, maybe there's hope that, although the I'm going to sound crazy with this, but the color of the red of the railings on the Enterprise, they look wrong. It's like it's too sharp of a red. It's too glossy.
Well, isn't it even in the cage? Those aren't even red; they're black. The railing, there's not even a red color scheme in the cage. It's all black.
I don't know, but I mean, and obviously, they're gonna make it look modern and different. And I could get excited about just that is a cool modern re-imaging of the Enterprise. But I will remain optimistic that they will decide where we'll go with we'll clean house, go with some new writers.
You think that they will?
Why? If I were in charge, I would. So why would they not?
If I were in charge, I would say Alex Kurtzman, Kristen Bear, Akiva Goldsman, Michael Chabon, and anyone else who's written on Star Trek Discovery or Picard have no business writing for Star Trek. And I would clean house. Like what happened in season 1 of The Next Generation is another thing that I get hung up on about a lot in the Star Trek community. Oh, the first 2 seasons of The Next Generation were not that good. And apparently that translates, a lot of people, they just say all of the first 2 seasons of all Star Trek series, which is bullshit.
Well, the original series.
Because the original series, Deep Space Nine, I think, has a pretty good first and second season. Voyager, is meh, take it or leave it. But that show in general is sort of milquetoast. Enterprise, I could definitely see it having somewhat of a weaker first season, but it's like this idea that because the first 2 seasons of The Next Generation were super bad, that gives these shows carte blanche to just suck. And I think that's a really dumb way of sort of looking at it, because the writer's room of The Next Generation had almost 100% turnover from the pilot of the first season, right, to the third season premiere, which is not called Emissary, it's called Evolution.
Emissary was Deep Space Nine.
That was its pilot. But the third season premiere of Next Generation Evolution, that has Dr. Kelso from Scrubs, that's like really starts off kind of the golden era of the TNG. And people don't bring up, okay, well, almost all of the writers changed in that time frame. And so if you're really gonna make that comparison between like shitty starts to TV shows, and especially Next Generation specifically, because it's the strongest example, you kind of got to also take in consideration that they cleaned house. And I think, and I would be more optimistic about this show if they did start over with new showrunners, with new writers. I think CBS needs to do that at this point to get rid of, to get over some of the animosity of a lot of the fan base. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they need to be beholden.
Or even if they just want good writing.
Exactly. You're right. They don't need to be beholden to the fan base like that necessarily, even though the fan base are ultimately the consumers, let's be real. But yeah, if they want better writing and if they want writing that's optimistic, they need to hire new writers, I think. So
it's the simplest solution.
Yeah. I should also clarify, I talked a little bit on my soapbox about casting. I also want to talk about my own personal reservations with this show and with Discovery. We'll get into more of this when we review Discovery. But I have a problem with the sort of soft reboot where they redo the look of things when it exists in the same universe. So you've got Relics, the Next Generation episode, where they show Scotty on the bridge of the original series. 30 years after that was filmed, right? Then you've got Deep Space Nine has an episode that goes into that era. And again, they do a 100% faithful recreation of the original series. That happens again in Enterprise, where you see the original series Constitution class set, and it's portrayed faithfully. Now, I understand that the 1960s 1701 Enterprise looks really shitty by comparison to today's sets, to today's aesthetics. Okay, I get it. But in my mind, and I know not everyone's like this, and a lot of people do not have this problem at all. That's awesome. But in my mind, I cannot reconcile the technology that you see in Discovery and the technology you see in the Discovery Enterprise bridge with what we've seen in the original series and what we've seen depicted in The Next Generation, in Deep Space Nine, and in Enterprise. They all remained faithful, and then this new iteration of Trek just basically gives a middle finger to any kind of technological or visual continuity in Star Trek. And if you don't get bothered by that, that's awesome, but it bugs the shit out of me. And I can't get past it, and that's why I can't get into Discovery, I think.
Don't worry, Ben. They're going to fix it all by giving the Enterprise a spore drive.
God, I hope they don't do that. But
Saucer's
they could.
Going to spin. Mm-hmm. They're going to have giant tardigrades hiding in the deep recesses of the ship.
They're going to give the ship a third nacelle.
I can't say, though, I mean, how excited I would be, though, to see if they just had 100% recreation, or even just a almost identical, maybe sharpened up a little bit, but carbon copy of
It's
The
awesome,
bridge
right?
Would be super cool.
Well, there are ways to do it. Because we were watching a scene from Enterprise where they're on the USS, or the ISS, I should say, Defiant, right? Which we then see in the regular universe in an original series episode, which is awesome. But we see them on the bridge and like going through the corridors. And this was shot in 2005, so production values were decent at that time. I mean, it looked fairly modern. Looked fine. I didn't have a problem with it. They were able to pull it off. So if you're going to set the thing at that same time frame, don't make it look like it's 100 years after the next generation, right?
Which is where it lies in just that everything should have just continued on in the timeline.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, would have made way more sense.
Mm-hmm. If they had set Discovery 100 years after the next generation, they keep telling the fan base that you can't do that anymore. All of those stories have been told. That's 100% bullshit, because you're going back to 5 years before the original series and literally telling episodic stories on the 1701 Enterprise. So, they should have just gone into the future. I mean, that's all. You can't change anything about Discovery. It's been out for 3 years at this point. But again, my faith in the writers is at absolutely zero after Picard. So even Discovery going 800 years into the future, while that would normally be, I think, a really cool thing, all I see is them fucking up 800 years of Star Trek canon and I feel like they're definitely going to do this by showing all of these events that they determine happen in this time frame that now are canon to the Trek universe. So any show that takes place in that 800-year time frame will have to be beholden to these weird, not explained, ham-fisted, loose end ideas that are probably going to be shoehorned into Discovery.
I don't know. I think what's going to happen is CBS is going to go bankrupt. They're going to have to sell Star Trek, and then they're going to bring in a whole new team to take it over, and they're just going to retcon everything that's happened in the last 5 years in Star Trek.
Can you imagine the joy that you would feel? This didn't. I wonder how they do that. How do you retcon?
Oh, I think they would just try to say like, we just
don't think that.
Just
happened.
Ignore that.
Well, there is some online sort of discussion about the fact that that CBS's Star Trek doesn't take place in the Prime Universe technically. And again, this is all secondhand from me, so it's a lot like coronavirus videos on YouTube. Take this with a pound of salt. But in the 1980s, when Paramount and Roddenberry were coming up with the sort of, I think maybe the syndication agreement for the next generation, the agreement was that anything that was licensed was not considered like Prime Universe canon. And CBS is licensing the Star Trek intellectual property. And so there's like some sort of, I would say maybe a little bit desperate
so you're telling me there's
nerds.
some hope.
Yeah, are basically saying, that under those terms, none of what they make technically counts as being canon. So you could technically write away everything. I think they've really complicated that with Patrick Stewart playing Picard, because now it's like you could get away, I think, with saying, "Oh, Star Trek Discovery that doesn't exist." But now with Picard, and he's still playing Jean-Luc Picard.
Picard is a robot now, Ben. You just got to deal with it.
I hate that's such a bullshit ending.
He's a robot, Ben.
I hate that goddamn show so much. I'm sorry, I do.
What are you talking about, JL?
It's all the time we have today.
I think that'll do it.